Why does everything have to be so early? All right. Spanish Fork Planetary Qualifier. What a drive. It's about an hour and 40 minutes away for me, so we had to wake up bright and early to get out there on time, and I am not a morning person. This event, it went pretty well. It was fun. A lot of interesting decks. I didn't do quite as well as I was hoping I would do, but, you know, things happen. And we'll get them next time. There's another one here in Utah, luckily, so we'll see how that ends up. This was also my little brother's first time playing in a major competitive event for any card game, so kind of shout out to him for giving it a good try. He was on Anakin Data Vault, for anybody wondering. He's still kind of figuring out the game. He wasn't able to get any wins, unfortunately, but, you know, you live and you learn, and he wants to go to the next one, so... We'll see how things go, and he's kind of going on this adventure with me in a way, so pretty cool having him along. With that being said, let's get on over to the computer, as much as I hate this scene, but we kind of need it for this one, and talk about the decks that I was trying to decide between, the one that I ended up picking, and then we'll get into how the overall event went. First off, I had two decks technically that I was trying to decide between, sort of three if you count Kazuda Red as a different deck, which we'll talk about as well. So Kazuda in general, I just like what this character kind of brings to the table with being able to negate abilities, right? It allows us to play a lot of interesting cards, things that are really well statted, like Contracted Hunter or even Fireball, and just kind of get ahead on stats without having to turbo resources or something, which I think is pretty interesting. He also makes it so you don't break the action economy in that way either, with the way his ability works. And I think his flip side is just strictly worse than his front side, in my opinion, because it's a non-attack trigger. It's a lot harder to negate effects reliably with the other side, whereas on his front side, you just use his ability and then you get another action. So yeah, I don't know. I like Kazuda. I like I like kind of what he brings to the table and what we have access to. I was trying to decide between a red build like this one and a double yellow build like this one. And I just really was having a hard time figuring out which one to play, because on the one hand, the red build has really good matchups into most things because, well, it's just kind of straight aggro. It's kind of like Vader Yellow in that way, where you're just kind of putting dudes out and just attacking. It has some cool tools like Trench Run and Heroic Sacrifice that for some reason work with Kazuda, because I guess his ability is a blanket effect that just makes it so the guys can't gain abilities either, which is really weird. They probably should have worded this differently, but it's cool that it works that way, I guess. And yeah, so you can really get a lot of damage really, really fast with this. The red build also has access to the BB-8 kind of setup, since you have Black One and Fireball, both are resistance units, and so is Kazuda. So if he's on the ground and you pilot something with BB-8, you can actually ready up Kazuda if you really wanted to. You probably wouldn't ever do that. In this build, you're almost always piloting something, but that is a cool play. It's kind of like a Koyo turn, essentially, except as a little pilot. The only downside to the red build is green heroism. Bright Hope shuts you down pretty hard, and unless you have a Trench Run in hand or spare the target to get it off the board, you're not getting over it. So I actually ended up kind of switching up my build a little bit. Not only am I playing extra 1-drops like with Crackshot V-Wing, just to make our turn 1 as good as possible, but I also put Surprise Strike in instead of Forecause, because Forecause really only was working against decks like Kira. Every other deck, like, it didn't do anything. It was kind of a waste of time. I put in Surprise Strike to help give me some more answers into Bright Hope, because at least with this, a Fireball or something can get over it. It still doesn't reliably help because a lot of our plays are these little 1-drops that only have 2 damage. So Bright Hope was a huge problem for this deck, and while we do have some ground presence, if they just shut down our space presence, that's a good majority of our deck that's just not doing damage. Whereas with Kazuda Yellow over here, kind of a similar story, except instead of Bright Hope being our problem, it's actually grindy decks are our problem. Because this deck is similarly aggressive, not obviously as aggressive as the red build, but we do have more tempo capability. So we can still keep up pretty well with the other aggro decks, and then we can switch to tempo, exhaust things down, bounce things, whatever, and kind of just control that mid to late game and just keep getting reliable little pokes in as we go. But against blue heroism, while we don't have to deal with Bright Hope, we do have to deal with extra HP because they're probably playing Data Vault or Colossus. And on top of that, we don't really have great answers to leaders in this deck, unfortunately, right? We can exhaust them every now and then, like with Cunning or with the Mando pilot, and that's good, but when that's the only real way we have to contend with big leaders like Anakin, for example, things really aren't looking super great for us. And on top of that, redemption is a problem in blue heroism, right? Because not only is the matchup kind of grindy, but they also drop a redemption on you, and all of a sudden, you don't really have an out. So I like Kazuda, I like what it does. It just, both builds have really bad problems, and I just didn't have the time to figure out how to sort out those problems. So I don't know. I could have played this because I do have a lot of time with Kazuda Yellow, but I just wasn't sure. Then we had Luke Data Vault, was actually my second pick of all things, because Quinlan wasn't really working out for me. It just kind of dies to the space decks. Like Vader Yellow is a huge problem for Quinlan, and I wasn't sure how many of those we would see at this event. I didn't end up playing any, funnily enough, but any space-oriented deck, Quinlan just, like, you don't really have answers to. Like, you have some space units, but not enough. Especially if they're playing a lot of 1-drops, like in the case of Vader or even Kazuda. Not a whole lot you can do. You can't even ping them. So they're not Tarkin-townable, basically, throughout half the game. So I was really testing with Luke Data Vault here because this has been kind of a pet deck of mine since the beginning of set 4, because I actually really like what Luke brings to the table. Not only is he a ping effect, but his flip is also one of the most resilient flips of all the pilot leaders, right? I'd say Poe is probably slightly more resilient, albeit not as impactful. So Luke has that impact almost like an Anakin flip would, but is also resilient unlike the other pilot leaders, right? Because the only thing that can actually stop Luke is Bamboozle. Right, out of all the upgrade removal, Fang Fighter, Confiscate, whatever, the only one that hurts him is Bamboozle. So unless you're against a blue deck and they are mainboarding Rival's Fall, which some people do, some people don't, they don't really have an answer to the Luke. You can put this on whatever, and all of a sudden you're just smacking them for a ton of damage, and they don't really have an out to it. So I really like that. And essentially, as long as you can evade Han 1 Yellow and Quinlan, which are kind of the only 2 decks that are consistently playing Bamboozle, you're looking pretty good. So I don't know, I was really debating this, and actually I submitted my deck list as Luke Data Vault originally because I figured I was going to play this. This Falcon actually got replaced by Sabine's Masterpieces, just a little side note, because I like the Falcon, but Masterpiece actually synergizes more with the deck because it's a fighter, and it also brings another ping effect into the table. But I like this deck, and it kind of keeps up with a lot of things like Sabine will. Like its early game is very similar to Sabine in a lot of ways, just a little more space oriented. Your mid to late game, you have this powerful flip like Anakin, where you're doing just a ton of damage. You have really good kind of top end units that you can get out there. You have some flexibility with stuff like Han 1 green would, or even Han 2 green, where you have like the Poe, so you can instantly go wide if you need to against like Kira. So we kind of have a little bit of game into everything with this deck, and that's why I submitted it as my deck list originally, because it's like, you know what, I think this could work. I do play They Hate That Ship in my build because you can turn 1 blue leader off of They Hate That Ship, take out like a Green Squadron A-Wing or something, but you can also turn 2 blue leader and have it on the ground as a 5/5, which is huge, right? Having something like that on turn 2 on the ground. Sure, they get the 2 TIE fighters off of this, but like that's a pretty good trade-off, especially since you can just ping the TIE fighters with Luke, right? Like I'm not worried about these because I can get rid of them. So that's a really cool play. You can also just cheat out 3 drops on turn 1, seeing it like turn 1's Masterpiece, turn 1 Red 5, which is just, again, really good value. It helps you keep up stat-wise with the Hans, for example. And then of course, like you can get these other big units just earlier throughout the game, right? Turn 2 Patrol Wing is pretty good. Now you have a 4/6 space unit that also lets you attack, right? It Fleet Lieutenanted something. You can get Hammerhead red on turn 4, which is pretty good. You could alternatively play War Jug with this as well, and War Jug will instantly kill the tokens. So you have some different flexibility there, which is cool. You can also play like Senatorial Corvette, Dornian Gunship, since we play so many space units, is fine. So lots of different options there. And then Luke flip turn, you can get into Radis. Technically, you can get into this on your 5 resource turn. But yeah, so there's just a lot of like cool things you can do with They Hate That Ship. I was really debating playing this deck, but kind of last minute, like the night before, it was like midnight, I was just up doing testing, just trying to like solidify everything, make sure that I made the right choice. And ultimately, I decided to play Palpatine. And I know this threw some people off, because when I got to the event and they asked what I was playing, they were like, oh, we didn't even know that was like a choice. You didn't mention that in the other video, which was pretty funny. So why Palpatine, and why does this deck look so weird? So first off, Palp Yellow, because I like what Palp Yellow offers, right? Change of Heart just has a lot of synergy. We also gain access to Commandeer with Yellow, and I don't own Vaders, and so Yellow is kind of the best pick, because instead of Vader, I can just play Cad, which is just as good, if not better in some cases. So that's kind of why I went with Yellow. So Palp excels into decks like Kira and Rey and Anakin. And with the kind of goofy way that I have it built here, we actually have not a terrible matchup into Hantu and Sabine, because I can actually kind of keep pace with them, have a lot of ways to kind of get rid of their early units, and then obviously we just kind of come back how Palp normally would and just start doing big damage before they can restabilize, right? That's kind of the plan with Palpatine overall. And I do have some interesting choices like Lux for Han 2, and I guess Piet of all things, right? So this makes it to where Han's 2 ability is much less annoying, because now we also get value out of it, right? Whether we ready a dude so we can get more damage in, or we exhaust one of their units that might be readied at the moment, Lux actually brings a lot to the table into that matchup. We also have the Droid Commando, because since Lux is a Separatist, we can play this kind of heavy Separatist package, and then have the turn 2 Commando, which allows us to be really proactive against decks like Sabine. You know, we have the play going into turn 2, and we started with Courier or Poggle or whatever. We can turn 2, open with Commando, take out their turn 1 play if it's on the ground, or Eager Escort Fighter if it's in the space, which is why we play this as well. And then we're just looking pretty good, right? We have Commando that probably survives. We have one of these guys still in play, right, that can do damage to the base. We're golden at that point. Sure, if we're doing this, we're not ramping. But again, I find a lot of the times ramping into the deck that are more aggressive, while can be good still, being proactive also helps keep up. And so I had a very different philosophy with this deck than I think most Palp players do. And like that just really shows overall where I'm not really playing for the late game as much. Like I still have the ramp and stuff, but my top end just really isn't as heavy as you would typically see out of a Palp deck, because I want to be more proactive. I'm using these ambushers. I'm using things like Patrol Fighter, which is a pick that actually did a lot of work for me throughout the event and nobody expected, because we're making the droid tokens and stuff. And this also synergizes with like Traitors and Change of Heart too. It gives us another way to sack things other than Palp's ability, while also giving us another body. And so this ended up coming in play quite a lot throughout the event. So this really came up. I bounced a lot of things that people upgraded, like they'd put Lukes on things, or they'd like get a bunch of experience counters on stuff like in a Rey matchup, and I could just play Patrol Fighter, bounce the thing, get rid of their upgrades, and then I'm just kind of on top there. So this was actually a really good pick. It is also the card that's pushing the deck to 52 cards. Yeah, I'm at 52 in this build because I just couldn't make space for everything that I wanted to play without going up in numbers. And while no, we don't get Data Vault to give us extra HP going with Yellow, 2 extra cards, it barely changes your statistics, and so I was okay with that. And yeah, just overall, that's kind of why I picked this deck and why I built it the way I did. Just really soften up that aggro matchup as best as possible, and then just sideboard more into like the control matchups. We have the Devastators, another Relentless, the Palps Return to help us into Kira and stuff. So while we have the capability to win against Kira game 1, once we side, we're almost guaranteed to win against Kira, right? As long as we play well, Kira's not going to be an issue, right? And this deck's super reliable into decks like Kira. So again, the night before, like last second, resubmitted my deck list, changed the Palp, and this is the deck that I went with. Now let's get into how I did and the event overall. My round 1 was against Han 2 Data Vault, where I unfortunately misplayed in game one. I was still waking up. Again, I'm not a morning person. I just wasn't thinking right. I wasn't doing the math where I should have. And there was this point kind of really late in the game where I had his Cham that I had stolen using Palpatine's effect. So I had Cham in play, I had Palpatine in play, then I think I had one other unit in play, and they had no board at this point. Well, they played down a Republic attack pod that comes in readied, and instead of attacking it with the Cham and getting it off the board, I decided to just hit base, which was a mistake, right? I should have gotten rid of the attack pod and I would have been on top. And the player even said that if I killed his attack pod, I would have just won game one. So unfortunately, I lost to myself here in game one. And then game two, just really bad hand. So assuming I did win game one, if I hadn't misplayed, we would have gone to game three, and who knows, I could have won in game three depending on how my hand turned out. But yeah, unfortunately, lost to myself here, and Hantu took the win. Round two was Cad Tarkentown, which I won 2-1. He did get a game off of me. Just, I kept drawing into all of my ramp kind of in the mid game, and I was like, this isn't what I need. I need to be able to deal with his board. And I just kept drawing into ramp. So he did get a game off of me, which happens, but we still took the win there. Round three was Piat Green, which is like, go ahead, play your big ships. Those are my big ships. So yeah, 2-0 there. Apparently I mistyped this. That's my bad. Round four was Sabine ECL. I lost here, but I did get a game. I won game one and then lost games 2 and 3. Just really didn't have the gas, unfortunately. Kind of similar to the one CAD game that I lost. I kept drawing my ramp when I didn't want my ramp, which is probably the biggest problem with this deck. Is ramp is like this double-edged sword where when you see it when you want it, like it's great, but when you see it when you don't want it, like you just kind of die. Yeah, unfortunately I did lose here. Again, this is probably our worst matchup overall. And even though I've been able to get this kind of eased up to about a 50-50, again, it's still slightly favored towards Sabine typically. As you can see, the draws just weren't on my side, so we did take the loss there. Round five, Kira Data Vault. I won 2-1. He got me game one. I just didn't quite adjust my playstyle the way that I should have, because against Kira, you have to play like super passive, and it's really hard for me to switch into a passive playstyle, especially after I've been playing very proactively for the most part in all the other matchups. So he did get me game one, and then I sideboarded, and then I won game 2 and 3. So Kira Data Vault, not too big of a problem. It was a good game though. It was pretty close. But again, once you just kind of get to that late game and you're stealing their stuff and just kind of like being able to react to whatever they do effectively with like change of heart and stuff, you just eventually slowly win in that matchup. Raid Data Vault, 1-2-0. Not really much to say here. Palpatine does really good into this deck. And then round 7, of all things, and this was the unfortunate round for me because I needed to win round 7. If I won, I would have gotten top 16, which would have at least let me walk away with a box. And unfortunately, I just couldn't quite get there. I ended up against another Emperor deck of all things, and it was red. So I really wasn't sure what to expect. I knew that like the Palpatine unit and probably Crate Dragon would be in his deck. But other than that, I was like, how is this gonna play? How is it gonna compare to my deck? So I didn't really know what to do. And this is probably like the weirdest matchup. You end up in this kind of Palpatine standoff where neither of you want to flip because you both want to be able to steal something and then probably steal it back. And I just never ended up in a good position here where I could force his flip before mine. And this, I think, comes down to the way that I have my deck built, where it's a lot harder for me to apply that pressure and kind of force that flip, whereas his deck had a lot more capability for that. So he did beat me, unfortunately, and that made me end with 4-3-0, no draws for me, in 36th place by the end of the finals. So overall, I didn't do terribly. I didn't do as well as I would have hoped, but I did have a lot of fun, and we did have a lot of different decks. Like, I didn't play the same deck twice, which was awesome. The first PQ I played, and the only other PQ I've played it to this point, back in set 3 with Django, I played against 3 mirror matches. So I'm glad that like that didn't happen here, and every round was something different. That made it really fun and just a lot better data sets for me to see kind of really how Palp is doing and what adjustments I need to do. Because I think I'm probably going to stick with Palpatine, to be honest, moving forward, just because I like how he works in the current meta. But yeah, there were some hiccups. Like I said, I misplayed a lot of little things, a lot of things that I'm able to look back on and like realize my mistakes, which is always, you know, the best thing you can do in big events like this. And my overall score, I ended up exactly the same as I did with Django last set, right? That PQ last set, I also went 4-3-0 with Django. So at least my performances have been consistent. And I did pick, I think, a pretty good deck into this field. Very exciting to see. Again, no two decks were the same that I played against, which was awesome. And overall, we did pretty good. Now, when we look at the event itself, you can see here, we have the top 8. Unfortunately, I don't know what some of these players were playing, so maybe if any of them watched the video, go ahead and comment what you played here. But we had 2 Han 2s in the finals. Now, neither of these are the one that I lost to. So congrats to Travi for getting your win there. I know you've been working really hard and been seeing a lot of success with this deck in the meta so far, so it's cool to see you pull out the win there. Then we had a Quinlan in third, which is honestly surprising. I want to know what her matchups were. And then we have a Han 1 green in 4th place. And then we also have a new Vader, Lake Country, of all things. And we see his deck. I really want to see what his deck looks like. Did he just take his list off? Because that's kind of sad. I really wanted to see what he was doing. Or she, I don't know. That's unfortunate that we don't get to see their list. For some reason, this whole group of players have 0. What's going on with that? They wouldn't all be 0s. But yeah, we had quite the field, right? We had Sabines, we had Dooku's, like, and there were actually multiple Dooku players at this event, so that was pretty cool. Some Vaders again, some Kiras, and a Chancellor Palpatine. That's pretty cool. Let's see what their list was like. This is a really interesting list. So they're going blue. So they're kind of playing a little more kind of control oriented. All right, I can kind of see that because you can have the Lukes and the Snokes and stuff, which is kind of cool. We had a total of 85 players, which is more than the last one. I think the last one only had like 72. So that was really cool to see. We had quite a big field here, and I have a lot to learn. That's what I have for you today. I just wanted to recap this event and talk about it a little bit. I'm just going to come back in the next one and hopefully do better. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.